Welcome to Section 5, the Partners and Suppliers Dimension for the Service Request Management Practice. There will be two understanding type of questions in the exam of the 20 questions from this topic. Essentially, we'll be looking at what activities partners and suppliers can perform for this practice for an organization. And so these are known as third parties. Partners work more closely than regular suppliers. That's the difference. And they will look at some dependencies and how to manage them and other things that partners and suppliers can do for this practice. So the role of the third parties, let's take a look at that. A first look. Service relationships can exist between consumer and provider and their own third parties. In fact, the provider is also a third party for the consumer or customer. So whenever this practice is undertaken by a third party, particularly fulfillment of certain service request in order to take the action for the service request, then certain parameters may be constrained due to the supplier's way of working, their policies and way of operation. For example, the time they need to fulfill the request, the convenience for the user they create, and the periodicity of the communication they send out to the user during the fulfillment of the request. Now, again, that has to be as per the organization's expectation, but it's not necessary that the supplier can really meet them. So that can be a challenge, and it can conflict with the expectations on the other side. And also this can also be not be fitting into the user's expectations also. And the other key thing, in fact, even more important, is that when the service requests are fulfilled by the service provider, not the third party, then it is possible that in order to fulfill their request, they need to deal with third party components. So, for example, if I'm an organization's employee and I receive a request for a deployment of a software license on somebody's personal system, office system that is, but that license is externally sourced, and then it can be tricky. So, or if I had to work with a third party to execute that request, then also it can be challenging for the previous reason that I explained here. So when components are coming from third party, it creates even a bigger challenge. Unless that third party themselves are fulfilling the request with respect to that component. And all this should be clarified in the service level agreements and procedures. And also the request models as well. The request models, there can be a request model for third party involvement related service request handling. And another request model for requests that are handled internally and not from outside teams. But again, request model can be based on technology type also. So it's up to the organization to define the basis for the request model types. Then during the request fulfillment, the communication with customers and users should be smooth, routine, and transparent, and to set realistic expectations and smooth request fulfillment. That also means that during the initial discussions, the supply should make sure that the expectations they set with the customer is realistic. And this practice should also be used to ensure that wherever possible, third parties will have to adjust their level of service to the needs of the organization. Just if the third party mentions that, sorry, we cannot meet this service level, if they do that repeatedly with many customers, they won't be in business. And therefore, they should, wherever possible, adjust the level of service. And this can happen also during ongoing work. Initially, they may have signed a contract with a certain level of service. For example, fulfillment time could be 24 hours. And then it's possible that after some time, the customer might request or ask for bringing down the fulfillment time from 24 hours to 12 hours. So the supplier should validate whether that is possible or not. If yes, that will be really good for the business. Then generally partners and suppliers may support the development, management, and execution of the service request management practice. And that means that most of the activities can be performed by a specialized third party supplier or partner. And that's because the service request management processes can be defined clearly, they can be tested before they are made live. So it's more predictable as compared to incident management, which is more unpredictable. And the integration of the third parties should be done properly into the practice process workflows. And there should be relevant policies for the supplier to comply when they are contributing to this practice of the organization. And we all know that the service request management practice has a direct impact on user satisfaction. And therefore, caution is needed when using third parties because they can either create a positive impact, improve the current perception of the provider, or downgrade it. So, third parties need to be working well with the organization in these arrangements. And one thing we need to also acknowledge is that the supplier management practice will also be involved because of these involvement of the third parties. It won't be just the service request management practice when the contract is created and those associated activities which are contract related.